Once upon a time, I had a job at a bookstore, and within 1 week of me starting at this job, I had a stalker, a customer. And no, it wasn't Carol for once, it was a man. And for the sake of the story, we're gonna call him because that was actually his name. Because I'm kind of stupid, it took me like 5 full business days of him showing up every day and doing what I'm about to tell you for me to realize that, like, oh my God, he's stalking me. This isn't just a customer coming into the store. Like, oh my God, this is bad. The first interaction we ever had was relatively normal, like any other customer. He comes in, he asks me to help him find a book. I find the book, I hand him the book, and we chat about the book for a little bit. Okay, that's my job, is to sell you the book. Second time he comes in, he asks me to find him a book. I lead him to the aisle, I find the book, I put it in his hand, we chat about the book for a little bit. This time, he follows me around the whole store. He's following me around from job to job to job, all the way around. Even when I'm with customers, he's watching me from afar. The only place I could lose him is by going into the back room, which I can't be back there for long because my job is to be on the floor selling the books to people. Third time he comes in, he says to me, "You're so pretty." I say, "Thank you so much. What book are you looking for?" I lead him to the aisle. I hand him the book. We chat about the book for a little bit. I'm on my way back to middle of the store, like my home base, if you will. And he follows me there and he slides across the counter a little piece of paper. On it is my name written like 5 times in various types of calligraphy font. And I go, "Thank you so much." He's like, "You like it?" And I'm like, "Do I like this paper with my name on it a bunch of times?" "Yeah." Super cool. "Thank you." I go, "I'm gonna leave this beautiful piece of paper here at the desk and then I'm gonna go do my job. So it was nice seeing you. Goodbye." And he's like, "Goodbye." And I leave and I go help another customer. I come back and he's still standing in the exact same spot. I go, "Is there something else that I can help you with?" He goes, "No." "Okay. All right, I'm gonna go then." I start walking away. He follows me because I, again, am kind of stupid. I don't really think much of this. I'm like, this happens to everyone, right? Stuff like this happens to me all the time. It's totally fine. Also, I'm 22 at the time. I forgot to mention that he was like at least 35. He ends up leaving, whatever. Later that night, I'm part of the closing team. So I've now noticed something. It's happened 3 times in a row. So I know now that it is a pattern. The books that I am handing him, that he's asking me to find for him and I'm giving to him in the aisles, he is then leaving in random parts of the store to later be cleaned up. He's not buying the books. So I'm like, huh. All of these books that he's asking me to find, he's not buying them. He's not a paying customer. So he's wasting my time and then making me clean up his mess later. I mentioned this all to my boss as like a little hee hee ha ha. I'm like, "You know that customer that keeps following me around the store all the time? Well, he gave me this calligraphy thing today. And also I realized that he's leaving all the books that I give him around." And she goes, "Kaylin, that's weird." And I go, "What? No, it's just my name on a piece of paper." She goes, "How does he know your last name?" And I go, wow, that's a really great question because my name tag only says my first name on it and that did not clock to me at all the first time he hands me that. How did he know that? I don't know. My boss goes, "Yeah, okay, next time he comes in, let me know and I'll talk to him." I go, "Okay, great." Next time I'm in, he comes in. Great. I will never forget this. He's wearing a top hat. Okay, he's Sunday best. He walks up to me, says, "Hi, Kaylin." And I go, "Hi." "What book do you need help finding today?" He tells me. I bring him to the aisle. I hand him the book. I say, "Are you going to buy this book?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Okay, well, if you change your mind and you decide you don't want to buy this one, can you please just leave it with one of us so that we can put it back instead of just finding it in a random place in the store?" And he's like, "Okay, yeah, fine. I'll do that, fine." I go, wow, okay. I pissed him off. He's not going to want to follow me around today. Wrong. I go to walk away from this conversation and what I'm trying to do is find like a safe space where I can use my headset and say, "Hey, boss, is back. Can you help?" But he's too close behind me the entire time that I'm walking. Every aisle that I walk in, he's right behind me, so I can't say much of anything. I end up going back to like the little home base at the center of the store. He walks up to me and it didn't take long because he was only a few feet behind me the entire time. Again, he's wearing a top hat when he's saying this to me. I need you to just picture it. He goes, "Hey, do you want to hang out sometime?" And I go, "No, thank you. I'm so busy. I'm in school. I got this job. You see me working. Like, I don't have any time. I'm so sorry." He goes, "You don't want to hang out at all?" And I was like, "No, I'm sorry." He goes, "Oh, no problem. We don't have to hang out outside of your job. We'll just hang out here at your job." And I was like, wait, hanging out and job are 2 different things. They can't be done at the same time. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this to this man when by some divine miracle, my boss walks by and we make eye contact for a split second and she knows exactly what she needs to do. She walks up to us and she looks at me and she says, "Hey, Kaylin, can you go back to receiving? They need help back there." And I go, "Okay, great. There's no one in receiving and no one needs help, but I know she's just trying to get me away from him." As I'm walking away, she's talking to him. I find out later that what she said was like, "Hey, I really need you guys to like stop talking so much on the floor. Like, I'm really trying to make sure that she's getting trained properly and knows how to do her job. And there's a lot of things that we need to do, especially this close to close. Like, you can't be chatting with her constantly. She needs to be able to talk to other customers." And he's like, this is what he said to her apparently, was like, she's my friend. She's my friend. I just want to talk to her. She's my friend. And she's like, okay, but like she needs to be doing her job while she's at job. Like, do you understand? He's like, yeah, I get it. Like, she's my friend, she's my friend, she's my friend. My boss tells me this afterwards, and I was like, I don't know this man. You need to know that I don't know this man. We are not friends. I come into work the next time, okay? I get to the center of the store, that little home-based desk situation, to go and clock in. As I'm clocking in, I look down, and there is a black coffee and a lemon loaf under the counter, like behind the desk, with a note on it, written in calligraphy, my first and last name. I look at the other person that's behind the desk with me, and I say, hey, do you know what the hell that is? I know what that is, but I'm like, do you know what the hell that is? And she's like, yeah, some guy with a top hat bought it for you and left it for you there. First of all, okay, top hat again. Second of all, I don't drink black coffee. Third of all, I don't accept food or beverage from strangers. How did he know that I was coming in today? Because my schedule has not been the same this week as it was last week. I'm like, oh no, this is escalating and I don't know what to do. I'm pondering what I'm going to do about this situation. He walks up. He says, oh my God, hi, Kaylin. Did you see the food and beverage that I left you? I say, yeah, I just did. You know, thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it. I wish that you had asked me beforehand because I would have told you no, unfortunately. I don't accept food and beverage from strangers. He goes, we're not strangers, we're friends. I go, oh, okay. I really appreciate the gesture. I'm just like a little weird about food and beverages, and if I didn't make it or buy it, like, I'm not going to consume it. I'm so sorry. He's like, it's the lemon loaf, isn't it? You don't like lemon loaf. And I was like, no, it's not about the lemon loaf. Again, thank you so much for the gesture. It's just that if I am not the one like making it or buying it, I'm not going to consume it. Like, thank you so much, but seriously, please don't ever do anything like this again. I can tell by looking at him that he's like internally crashing out because he's like, he's thinking like I fucked it up by buying the lemon loaf, and I'm trying to be like, no, it's not like the lemon loaf itself. It's the fact that you are buying me. You get it. I go, hey, are you looking for a book? By chance, is there anything I can help you with? He goes, yeah, I'm looking for this book. I go, okay. We do the whole thing again. I bring him to the aisle, I hand him the book, and then he follows me around again. This time, we walk directly by my manager, and he's like trailing behind me by a couple of feet, yapping, and I'm not responding. She springs into action. She's such a badass. I love her. Springs into action, walks up to me and says, hey, Kaylin, can you go do blah, 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 blah? And also, hey, can I talk to you over in the cafe for a sec? He's like, yeah. They go to the cafe. I go do whatever she told me to do. Then a couple of minutes later over the headset, I hear my manager go like, okay, Kaylin, he's gone and he's not coming back. And I was like, what? I go find her on the floor. I'm like, what happened? She's like, I told him, you're making her uncomfortable. You need to stop following her around all day. You cannot be buying her food and drinks. We're getting a little weird. You need to leave her alone. I was like, what did he say? And she's like, he just kept saying that you're friends. You're friends over and over again and that you're just hanging out. And I was like, you can't be hanging out while she's on the clock. And also, I don't think that those feelings are reciprocated. Her job is to be nice to you. This is what customer service is. I've asked you before to stop following her around the store and talking to her nonstop. You cannot be doing this. If I see you doing it again, you're getting trespassed from the store. You're not coming back. I can't remember how my manager said that he reacted to that information. Like, I did not write that down, of course, but I don't think he yelled at her or anything. I think he was just angry, and he walks out the front door. Important information. He walks out the front door. My manager's like, I don't think he'll be bothering you again. Like, I made it very clear that if I catch him talking to you again, like, I'm low-key gonna call the cops and have him trespass. Like, it shouldn't happen again. I go, okay, great. Like, that should be the end of it, right? Awesome. No, of course it's not. 2.5 hours goes by. I'm clocking out for the end of my shift. Mind you, it's been pouring rain all day. I leave the store and I'm walking towards my car, and all of a sudden I hear behind me, Kaylin. I turn around and it's smoking a cigarette outside of the store. Now he's chasing after me. He had been standing outside in the rain outside of the store, chain smoking cigarettes, waiting for me to get off my shift so that he could talk to me. This is what he says. He goes, Kaylin, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to get you in trouble. And I was like, oh my God, no, like, it's okay. He goes, no, like, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't mean to get you in trouble. I was like, no, like, really, it's okay. I have to go, like, right now, though. And I run to my car. I start driving away, and he's looking at me like this. Then late that night, he posts this review of our store. The manager is irritable and rude. Unless you have a very specific thing you are looking for, will come to you and give you an unnerving lecture, leaving you uncomfortable. But it gets 2 stars instead of 1 because it pretty much has every book unless it's really obscure. And then he never came back again. I never saw him again. That was the last time he was ever in the store. He never came back. That's it. That's the story of my stalker at the bookstore. Have a great day.
Possible the biggest serial killer of all time that's just been caught, August 2026. It's Eugene Horsch. This all started when he was pulled over 2 months ago in June of 2026. He was pulled over alongside an unnamed female that had the ID belonging to Blair Tonzelli, which is a girl that's been missing for more than 3 years. So she might be one of the victims as well. So what we know is that Eugene Horsch has a house in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. When the DEA searched the house, because when they pulled him over, he had so many charges that it was unreal, plus the missing person ID. He had illegal weapons. He had large amounts of drugs on him. He had that missing person's ID. There was all kinds of crazy stuff going on when they pulled him over. So they did a DEA search on his house. What they found is truly shocking, and I'm surprised we haven't seen more of it on the mainstream media. They might just be scared to let people know that people like this could be your next door neighbor. They found more than 700,000 images of what appeared to be RAPE and death. They found more than 60,000 videos containing the same subject material, more than 10,000 hand-drawn drawings and manuscripts, etc. This evidence is huge. We're talking about almost 1 million things of evidence they're having to go through. So they start going through them thinking that it's just stuff that he's downloaded off the dark web and he's just a sick individual. But they're looking for this Blair girl, right? Well, when they're looking through the videos, they realize, hey, some of these videos and photos are from inside of this house. And they only went through roughly about 5% of the data. So only 5%. And they already found out that he is definitely responsible for the murders of 4 women. But they haven't found their bodies. It's just videos and photos of him doing things to them and then them dead in the videos and stuff. Gabrielle had been missing since 2012. And Maribel went missing in 2018. Now, the other 2 women that are believed to be involved in this is Blair, which, you know, she's missing since 2023. Supposedly, her father and Eugene's father had some kind of drug arrangement originally planned out. They found a giant grow house in his basement and a humongous stash of illegal weapons. So this guy's into like every single bad thing you could be into, essentially. And the other woman was Amy McHale, and she also had ties to him. She was actually married to Eugene's father, so she would have technically been his stepmother. Now, we don't have videos and photos of them yet. They're still going through everything. We have videos and photos of the other 2, though. And then we also have 5 urns containing human DNA, human remains. And we don't know who those 5 urns belong to. Now, here's the crazy part, is Blair actually told people days before she went missing that this crazy guy comes over to my dad's house and talks about melting people in these giant barrels. And that might explain why we haven't found any bodies yet. Because in these giant barrels that they found in his home, there was some kind of oil-like chemical substance that they are still analyzing right now to figure out what it is and what it does. My bet is it's some kind of acid that will completely vaporize, you know, bone, skin, and everything. This story is still developing. But already, we know that there are potentially 10 bodies involved in this already. And we've only gone through 5% of the evidence. So we're waiting to hear who that unnamed woman was. Was she somebody that had Stockholm Syndrome and was forced, like, you know, she was held captive by him? Or is she somebody that was a lure? We do see a lot of modern cases of a female lure being involved. And that's gone back for a while, but we're just now hearing a lot more about it. Especially when it comes to like human sex traffickers and stuff. A woman is much easier to get somebody lured into a location where the attack can take place. So we don't know who she was yet, or why she seemed to be a willing participant carrying around an ID belonging to another woman. So we're going to find out. There's a reason why she's remained unnamed at this point. So we'll see that coming up. It looks like he might be doing the classic trope, though, of hunting down people that were already in this like drug world that might not be looked into by the police as much, because apparently what I was looking up online, that Amy McHale at the time she went missing was struggling with mental illness and drug abuse, and then also Blair's father was involved in the whole drug world. She was in a house where there was drugs coming in and out of it a lot, and we know how the police tend to investigate things when it's very heavily drug fueled. And they have a long ways to go. It's taken them 2 months to go through 5%. This could be years and years and years of them uncovering people, bodies, connecting cold cases. You're talking about somebody from 14 years ago that we know of right now. That is a long time for a serial killer to remain active, and we know how serial killer habits are. Most serial killers only go a few months, not years, between murders. And right now, we know that we have a 2012 disappearance, a 2016 disappearance, a 2018 disappearance, and a 2023 disappearance. So we know that there's going to be a lot that are going to fill in those blanks. That's what we're just waiting to see, is what blanks will be filled with what information. The biggest serial killer of all time has possibly just been caught, and this is an update to my video I did earlier today. This is live 2026 in August. Multiple details are coming out about this very fast. This is Eugene Horsch that was arrested. He got pulled over back in June. Now here we are in August, and the police just keep finding connections to this. His dad, however, though, might have been the start and the root to all of this. At least they might have been working together. So people are piecing together who Eugene Horsch's father was, and he was R.C. Horsch. If you don't recognize this guy, that's good. That's great. I would be scared if you did. Because what he was famous for, he has his own Wikipedia page, is he directed very graphic adult videos. Not your regular adult videos, like your softcore adult videos, but very gruesome, sodomized situation, RAPE situations, videos for adults. And he's even been a convicted felon multiple times over, which ties right into the son who just got caught for supposedly killing these women. And he had a bunch of drugs with him, and he had a bunch of illegal weapons with him. They lived together in this house, and one of the women that is connected with the son, Eugene Horsch, actually was married to the dad. They were married between 2004 and 2008. This is Amy McHale. And even though they divorced in 2008, and she wouldn't go missing until 8 years later in 2016, during those 8 years that they were divorced, apparently they stayed friends, RC and Amy did. And they were frequently seen together, and she was seen spending the night over at his house multiple times. We know this. In 2016, RC would have been around his early 70s or so, 71, 72. I know when my grandpa was in his early 70s, he was still working construction every day and was an absolute unit. So we know in RC's later days, he just died last year. We know that in his later days, he was pretty bedridden and he had failing lungs. But that doesn't mean that he wasn't still involved or orchestrating this in some kind of way. Because the last body we can connect with Eugene that went missing happened in 2023. 3 years ago, the dad was still 2 years away from dying. He still could have been involved. We don't know. He might have been the mastermind orchestrating all of this. We know that there's been over 700,000 photos, videos, manuscripts, hand drawings pulled from this one house. Over 70 devices full of information pulled out of this one house of horrors. And if that was his line of work, if RC's line of work was directing these awful graphic films, what if we are looking at his work all wrong? What if it wasn't fake? What if that was real stuff back then? Or at least some of it was. And these, he just couldn't get he couldn't get off on it anymore. So what he needed to do is to make it actually happen. That's the theory that's now coming out, is that RC might have had a role in his son doing these heinous things. If you didn't watch my earlier video, the link will be in the comments where you can watch the first part. And I talk about briefly in there how the police were pulling all these videos off these devices, and they're like, man, this guy's into some sick stuff. And then they realized that Eugene is in these videos, and these women that are in the videos are actually missing, and their bodies have never been found to this day. And the backgrounds of these videos were inside of the home. So it looks like that's just a home video style of this stuff. And a lot of people are circulating. There's a lot of rumors going around that they're making snuff films and, RAPE films, which are very popular in the dark web. The black market area. They're very popular for these underground little circuits. And that's what a lot of people are going to. Now, people are getting even crazier with the theories, but really not crazier when the proof is there that this was like a cult thing. And there was multiple people involved. And that's why because you got to think, how long would it take to snap over 700,000 photos and videos and drawings? Like, there had to have been a bunch of people involved. That's what a lot of people are saying, because Eugene Horsch, when he was arrested, the girl that was in the car with him is still anonymous. She's still unnamed. But she was using the ID of a girl that went missing in 2023, the last missing girl that we know of timeline-wise. Her name was Blair. I talked about her in the first video. The Blair girl who went missing in 2023 had connections to Eugene and RC. So apparently her dad would do drug deals with Eugene's dad, RC. So before she went missing, she stated to multiple people that there was a guy that came over and was talking openly about melting people in barrels. And in my first video earlier today, we thought it was Eugene. But what if she was talking about RC, the dad, because this would have been before he died? What if in his old age and his senile years, when he knew he was dying anyhow because he was sick for a long time before he died, what if he was just openly talking about it because there's nothing to hide anymore? That's what we're getting into right now, and I'm sure more of it's going to come out very soon. So the police haven't named her yet because they're probably using her to release all the dirty detail information that they can. Because there's only two possibilities. She was either a willing participant and she was like the lure to lure their victims in, or she was about to be next in these situations and was being lied to or was imprisoned in some kind of way. That's the only two possibilities, that she would be using a photo ID of a girl that has been missing for 3 years. and then get renamed, named anonymously in this police report. So we're still getting details very quickly. A bunch of people are asking for updates. I'm trying to give you updates as much as I can. But R.C. Horsch, he's already dead, but it's looking like he had some kind of hand in this. And maybe he didn't physically have a hand in this, but maybe he inspired, because of his work, what Eugene is now being caught doing. They've only got through 5% of this over 700,000 pieces of evidence. And they've already found 4 connections for sure of murders. And there's 5 urns that have human DNA in them and remains in them, like ashes, that they don't know who they belong to. So we're going to see how this is going. No bodies have been found yet, because there's big vats of oil found on the property. They said it was like a Breaking Bad type lab in this house, in the cellar. And he quite literally could have been melting all of the physical evidence of these people's bodies. Stay up to date on this. We have a podcast that talks about this awful, gruesome stuff and true crime and all this stuff. It's called Matt from Nomads, M-A-T-T from Nomads, on Spotify and Apple Podcast. We're going to do more deep dives on this as more information comes out.
Story time on my creepy neighbor. So there's a house right beside my house, okay? Out of my window over here, it goes directly towards this man's front porch. This man, I wave at every morning around 8, okay? I wake up about 7:40 in the morning, and then he's normally at the window every freaking day at 8 in the morning, so I always give him a gentle wave, and he always waves back. Sometimes he'll even give me a smile. Normal stuff. Then just 2 days ago, I saw a moving truck in his driveway with 2 people coming out of it. They were younger, about like in their 30s maybe. And I went over and I asked him, I was like, "Hi, how's your grandpa doing?" I was just imagining, hoping I didn't get it incorrect, okay? And they're like, "Our grandpa." And I was like, "The guy who lives here?" Tell me why these people looked me dead in the eyes and tell me, "No one's lived in this house for over 2 years." Now, on the inside, I was dying, okay? But on the outside, I just laughed it off, thought he was joking, okay? I told this man, "I've been waving at an older man in this house every morning around 8 o'clock. And he told me that the house has been empty ever since his aunt died about 3 summers ago, and they've been trying to sell it ever since. So at this point, I didn't think anything like supernatural was going on or anything. I thought it was like maybe somebody was just like a homeless person got in the house and they were living there. I don't know. Anyway, the 3 of us were really confused. We didn't know what to do, so we just kind of left it there. I went home, and in the morning, of course, I looked out of my window at 8 in the morning because I was imagining he could be there like he always is. He was not. At 8:01 on the dot, I got a buzz on my phone, notification. "Motion detected at your front door." I about in my pants, okay? I went to the front door. There was an envelope. I opened the envelope. There was a picture of me in my window. I flipped the picture over as I am like quite literally shaking. And it said, "Thanks for waving back." Yeah. So that's my supernatural experience. Story time. So my plans for today is to go to that house, hoping the new couple is over there, whoever they were, and chat with them about it to see if I can get maybe a little more information somehow. I'm terrified, so let me know if you guys want a part 2, if this interests you, because it's terrifying me.
I dropped my phone under the bed. When I went to grab it, I looked and there was a man hiding under the bed. So I saw this story on Reddit. It was about a 22-year-old girl. She said she just moved into her first apartment. She was in the process of moving in. She was on the phone with her boyfriend one night and she went out to get the mail. She says the door that lets you in the apartment locks automatically. So she went to the entrance, got her mail, and then she went back to her room. She didn't think anything of it. She says she's sitting there on the phone with her boyfriend, opening the mail, and she drops her phone under the bed. When she reaches down to grab it, she sees a man laying on his side. Her back was facing to her, like when she looked under there. She's trying to play it off cool, not alert the man that she saw him under there. So she tells her boyfriend, "Hey, I'm gonna go take a shower." So she walks to the bathroom, locks the door, turns the shower on, then jumps out the window. She runs across the street, hides behind a car, calls her boyfriend and the cops, and waits for both of them to come. She gives the police her keys. They go into the apartment and they find the man standing at the bathroom door, waiting for her to come out, holding a knife in his hand. They carry him out, this thin, skinny guy out. She says he looked crazy, but he was a homeless guy who was then taken to the mental hospital. He'd gotten in when she went to get her mail, hid under the bed, and was waiting for her. Who knows what would have happened. If y'all want me to do more of these, let me know, or if you got your own story, send it to me.
The soccer field incident of 2024. I love a good glitch story, so let's get into it. So this man telling the story says that he is a natural skeptic, but an unexplainable event at a local park left two entire groups of parents completely spooked. He goes, I thought about it every day since, and here is the story of the day a soccer field seemingly existed in two timelines at once. He said at the time of this experience in 2024, he was living in a relatively small town in Oregon. It had a population of about 20,000 people, and he was the coach for his 4-year-old's soccer team. The season was drawing near an end with only just a few weeks left. He wants to note that there was a single person in charge of all of the teams and all of the times and locations. They would assign the teams and everybody stayed at the same field number at the same day of the week at the same time. There was never any rotating. So his soccer team was always scheduled at this certain park every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. on field 1. He also said there was a field 2 and there was another team that would go to that exact field just next to them every single Wednesday at the same time. And this went on like that the entire season, with the exception of one evening. So on this day, he shows up like he always did, and the players and the parents start to come on in, and he's greeting them and talking to them as they are arriving. Everything was going just like clockwork. So as he's chatting, as people arrive, he looks up and he notices another team is starting to arrive. And at first he thought it was that other team for field 2, like always. But as they got closer, he's looking at them and he notices that head coach is not the same. And the parents are not the same. Like, he recognizes nobody, even the children. Does not recognize one single kid. So this is kind of weird now. So this team starts to set up on field 1, which is where his team is setting up. And this is so bizarre because these kids, he's really looking closely now. He does not recognize anybody, but they are the correct age group and they're wearing the correct jerseys. And they have the exact same assigned equipment. So he's baffled and he approaches the head coach, who is a woman in her early 40s with brown curly hair. And he said to clear up the confusion, he just needed to go say something. So because, surely there's got to be some kind of an explanation, right? So he approaches her and he politely says, hey, the head of the soccer organization has us scheduled to be on field 1 every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. this entire season. And she looked at him and seemed confused herself and replied, no, we're always on field 1. I don't know what you're talking about. So he clarifies and he's like, you're scheduled for Wednesdays at 5:30 at this park on field 1. And she nods, yes. And then he's checking his smartwatch and he confirms in his mind, yep, it's Wednesday at 5:40 p.m. at this point. And he goes, but I've never seen you here before. And I have been here every Wednesday at this time. And she looks surprised and also frustrated. And she says, I've never seen you before. You've never been here. I don't know why you're here now. So he is increasingly confused. And he's like, did you reschedule your practice? Did you usually play on a different day? And she said again, in an increasingly frustrated tone, no, we're always Wednesdays at this time. We are always on field 1. I don't know why you are here. So it was already getting late and both of the teams needed to practice. So he says, well, there's usually another team on field 2. So you're welcome to go over there since they don't seem to be here yet. Or we can share the fields. And she just rolls her eyes and says, I guess we'll try field 2 for now. And then walked away shaking her head. And he's like, at this point, I feel like I was going crazy. I have no history of mental illness or psychosis or anything like that. So he's starting to search for some kind of anchor on reality. And he's focusing in now on the other team's parents, and he noticed that they were all visibly confused. Like the expressions on their faces seemed to say, what is going on? Why are they on our field? Like, why are they making us go to the other one? We're not supposed to go there. And he said, then he looked at his team's parents, and they are also visibly confused with their facial expression. And he said he had developed good relationships with these parents on his team. So he went over to get their impressions because he was so confused. And he's like, have you ever seen these people before? And they all just like shook their heads no. And then one of them said, no, I have no idea. I don't know what's going on. This is feeling really weird. Ugh, I have goosebumps. And he goes, that confirmed it for me that I was not crazy, since, this can't be a shared hallucination or something. So he goes, I explained, the coach over there said that they'd been here every Wednesday and they are always on field 1 and they have never seen us before. But I feel the same way. Like I've never seen them. And he's like, this is odd. And he said, as I said this, the parents' reaction was like as if the blood had drained from their faces. They were genuinely spooked, which did align with his internal sense. Another weird thing is that the other team that usually is on field 2 never showed up. The Phantom team just continued their practice on field 2 for that day, carried it out, and then everything went on. He also said that as the upcoming weeks came to finish out the season, this Phantom team never did come back. And he never saw them again. And then this usual team, the one that's supposed to have been coming for field 2, they did show up every single time after. He also says at the end of the season, there was a jamboree where all of the teams would get together and play, and all the teams were present playing in the game against the opponent of the same age. And on this day, he made a point to look out for that head coach, for the other parents he may recognize for that weird day, or any of those children from that weird day. And he said none of them. He saw nobody. To this day, he has absolutely no idea what the heck that could have been about. And it really bothers him because he is such a logical person. He just wants to make sense of it, and he cannot. So what are your thoughts, you guys? You gotta drop them in the comments. If you have a creepy glitch story of your own, please send it in. If you are interested in Creepy Storytime merch, check out the link in my bio. And if you're new here, follow for more Creepy Storytime.
A psychic told this woman that there was a sealed bottle hidden somewhere inside of her house, and that until she found it and undid it, her life was going to keep falling apart. The problem was, she had absolutely no idea what bottle she was talking about or even where to look for it. And according to this woman, everything started shortly after she moved into this house that she was now renting. And within a few months, her finances collapsed, her relationship ended, problems started at work, and her family relationships absolutely deteriorated. And at the exact time, something very strange started to happen inside of that house. And eventually, things got so bad that she went and saw this psychic medium. But during the reading, the medium kept repeating the one bizarre phrase over and over: you need to undo the bottle. You need to undo the bottle. She didn't know what she meant until months later, when a paranormal investigation team led her to pull up the floorboards in one particular bedroom. And what she says that she found underneath them is one of the strangest and craziest things that I've ever seen. So I'm going to call this woman Claire. And obviously, I have no way of verifying whether everything that happened to Claire or whatever she experienced did in fact happen. So take this story as entertainment and you can decide for yourselves. But according to Claire, before moving into this house, her life wasn't perfect. It was normal, right? She had problems just like everybody. But she had a decent job. She was in a good relationship. She was paying her bills, and she was close with most of her family. And then she found this house, and it was an older rental, relatively small, and it was somewhere outside of the UK. Nothing particularly remarkable about it. It had nice wooden floors, 3 bedrooms, a small backyard, and most importantly, the rent was surprisingly cheap. So she signed the lease almost right away. And within a few weeks, Claire noticed something strange about it. The house felt very heavy, and this was the only way that she could really describe it. There were certain rooms where she would suddenly become anxious for no apparent reason, and there was this one bedroom in particular that really bothered her the most. It was supposed to become her office, this room, but she rarely ended up using it because every time that she sat inside there, she felt like somebody was standing in the room with her, watching her, and it made her very sick. And then these noises started. At night, Claire would hear what sounded like someone slowly walking down the hallway, 3 or 4 steps here and there, and then silence. She would get out of bed to go and investigate, expecting to find something or some answer for it, but there would be nothing. Cabinet doors were opening on their own occasionally. Objects that she distinctly remembered leaving somewhere would appear somewhere else. And there were several times that she woke up in the middle of the night because she swore that she heard somebody whispering in her ear next to her bed. But the strangest activity always seemed to center around this one spare bedroom, the one that was supposed to be her office. And sometimes the door would be left wide open when she knew that she had closed it. And there were other times that she'd walk past it and catch what looked like movement or a shadow person, somebody standing in there, but whenever she turned around to go look, there would be nothing or nobody there. And then her life outside of the house began falling apart. And I don't mean like, she had one bad week. It was like somebody had started pulling individual threads out of her life. Her relationship became increasingly hostile until her and her partner had to end it. Unexpected expenses started piling up. Her car needed repairs out of nowhere. She fell behind financially. Problems developed at work. And then she started fighting with members of her family over things that, previously would have it would be no bearing on their relationship. And according to Claire, the strangest part was that she didn't feel like herself anymore. She was constantly exhausted, irritable, anxious, and she was literally losing weight because she was so sick. She dreaded going home, but yet also at the same time, she didn't want to leave the house. And eventually, one of her friends convinced her to go visit this psychic medium. And Claire wasn't expecting much because she is kind of on the skeptical side. So she didn't tell the woman about the activity in the house. She didn't mention anything about the spare bedroom. And according to her, she definitely did not mention anything about a bottle. But during the reading, the psychic suddenly became distracted, like she was, like someone else was talking to her, and she stopped talking and she closed her eyes, and after several seconds, she's like, there's something sealed. And Claire would ask her like what she meant by that, and the psychic would shake her head, and she's like, I can't explain it. And then she said something even stranger. She's like, you need to undo the bottle. And Claire would ask like, what bottle are you talking about? But the psychic didn't know either. She just kept saying that whenever she concentrated on Claire's house, she saw the image of something sealed inside of a container, and she kept repeating it over and over. Find the bottle, you need to undo it. Find the bottle, you need to undo it. So Claire left thinking the entire thing was absolutely bizarre, and she searched the house anyway. Kitchen cabinets, closets, garage, under the sink, and there was nothing. Eventually she stopped looking, but the activity continued and grew even more. One night she heard something slam against the wall of that spare bedroom so loud and so violently that she thought somebody was actually breaking into her house. Another time she woke up and she found the spare bedroom door wide open when she knows that it was closed because she doesn't go in there. And shortly after that, she claims that she started hearing scratching sounds coming from somewhere near the floor. And that's when Claire contacted a local paranormal investigation team, and they came to the house to investigate with cameras and audio recorders and different pieces of equipment. And while they apparently experienced several things while there that they couldn't immediately explain some of it. But there was one particular reading that kept getting their attention, and inside that same spare bedroom, their EMF kept spiking anytime it got near the floor. And there are also plenty of normal things that can cause an EMF to go off, like electrical wiring, bad appliances, outlets. And so initially that's exactly what they assumed, right? Bad wiring, except according to Claire, the readings kept directing their attention toward one specific section of the floor of the spare bedroom. And afterward, Claire couldn't stop thinking about it. The scratching, the bedroom, the psychic, the bottle, and finally she decided that she needed to know what was underneath those boards. So with the permission of her landlord, she got the okay to investigate, and she carefully pulled up part of the old wooden floor. And there was a dark cavity underneath when she opened it up, and she would shine her flashlight around, and and at first she saw dust and pieces of wood and debris, and then the light reflected off something that was made of glass. And Claire reached down and she pulled up this old mason jar and immediately remembered the psychic's words, "You need to undo the bottle." And she was like, "Is this the bottle?" So the jar had apparently been deliberately hidden underneath the floor. Thin rope had been tightly wrapped around it, and something that appeared to be looking like human hair had been incorporated into the binding with that rope. And across the lid were layers of hardened red and black wax, as though like somebody had intentionally sealed it shut. And Claire said every instinct that she had told her like she needs to throw that thing out, and do not open it. But eventually, following the psychic's guidance about safely removing it, she examined what had been placed inside of it, and there was sand and a thick old black substance that looked like mud or sludge. There were small nails, and 2 of them had actually been tied together into the shape of an X. And mixed among everything else were what appeared to be human fingernail clippings inside of it as well. Clara said she immediately felt sick to her stomach, like she was going to throw up, because whatever this was, someone hadn't accidentally dropped it under there. Someone had assembled it, wrapped it, sealed it, and deliberately hidden it beneath the floor of that specific bedroom, that room where she's been having all these issues. And she contacted the psychic again, and following her guidance, she removed the jar from the property and she disposed of it. And this is where the story gets even, a little more strange, because according to Claire, the minute that she got rid of it, the house went quiet. The footsteps stopped, the whispering stopped, the bad feeling, the energy, everything stopped. She never heard the scratching beneath the floor again either. Literally, the house went from all this activity to nothing. And over the following months, her life slowly began to correct itself. She got a better situation at work, she made up with her family, she made up with her partner, her finances stabled out, everything went fine. And it was as soon as she got rid of this. And she went back to sleeping normally, and life went back to normal. So I want to know what you guys think. Do you think that that jar had something to do with it, or do you think there was something else? Let me know in the comments.
My downstairs neighbor kept complaining that somebody was walking around my apartment every single night at 3 a.m., but I was always asleep at that time. When I was in my 20s, I moved into an old apartment building, and it was one of those ones where it had like 3 floors and it had 4 apartments on each floor. So I was on the 2nd floor. I had a lady directly above me, and I had an older man who lived alone that was right under me. There was one morning where I had my upstairs neighbor come knock on my door, and she asked me if I was moving furniture around at night. I looked really irritated, which was just kind of crazy because she didn't even know me, so I don't know why she had to come at me like that. But I told her no, like I'm asleep at that time. Like she said that she's heard dragging the furniture like across her floor. I assumed it was somebody else on the 3rd floor, didn't think much of it, I brushed it off. Till a few days later, my downstairs neighbor came and confronted me, and he said, "Why are you always walking around your bedroom at night? Like, it's always around 3 a.m., like you're so noisy." And I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm asleep at 3 a.m., like it's not me." That same night, I decided to stay up, and soon enough, it was like 3:07 a.m., and I heard like the loudest scrape, and it sounded like it was coming from above me, like on the apartment floor above me. And I heard footsteps and something being dragged. So then I decided to go up the next day, like around the evening time, and I brought it up to her, and she was like, "That's not possible. I haven't been home for 3 days. I went and like saw family. I actually just got back this afternoon." That made me feel pretty uneasy. That night I barely slept because I just kept thinking about this noise that I felt like I was going to hear again tonight. And again, I did hear it, but this time it wasn't above me, it was literally below me. And then again, it was like the loudest scrape. It was somebody pacing back and forth, and it was footsteps. And I literally, it's 3 a.m. I didn't care. I put on my robe and I went downstairs to my downstairs neighbor, which was like the older man. And I knocked on the door, didn't hear anything. I knocked on the door again, a little bit louder. Figured he was probably in his bedroom. Didn't respond back. I even called his name through the door, nothing. So then the next morning I went and I brought it up to my landlord. He looked at me really off, and he was like, "I don't know what you're talking about because the apartment below you has been empty for literally a year. We had an old man, he died in that apartment. We've had it bit like closed ever since. I don't know where you're thinking you're hearing things, maybe it was your upstairs neighbor. But I was like, no, I've literally talked to this old man before. Literally 2 weeks when I moved in, I went and I passed him in the hallway and he just kind of stared at me and he said, do you hear it? I didn't know what he's talking about. I figured he had some kind of like, maybe like mental illness. I don't know. He was old. Now I wonder if he was talking about the footsteps that I was hearing at night. My plan was to move out a couple weeks later because now I was terrified that somebody literally passed away in this building. And I remember on my final night at that apartment building, I was asleep and I woke up to a noise, 3 a.m. like it always is. It wasn't above me. It was not below me. It was inside of my bedroom. I heard footsteps and they sounded like they were coming closer towards me. And then I heard through, I'm not even kidding you, through my bedroom door, I heard like an older voice and it said, do you hear it now?
Have you ever noticed how the Grand Canyon looks like it could be hiding something? I mean, the Grand Canyon is massive. It stretches for hundreds of miles. There are places so remote, it could take days and days just to get there. There are no roads, there are no city lights, there are no signs of civilization in most parts of the Grand Canyon. And the crazy thing is, a lot of these places in the Grand Canyon, you are not even allowed to go. Now, one thing I find interesting is at the Grand Canyon, there are all of these strange rock formations, caves, and just eerie looking formations that don't seem natural. The other interesting thing about the Grand Canyon is there's a Native American tribe that lives at the bottom of the canyon called the Havasupai, right? And they are considered the guardians of the canyon. Now, why do they call themselves that? Why have they been there for 800 years? As if they're guarding something hidden in the canyon itself. Now, there was an interesting story that came out of Japan. There was this woman who said in the 1970s, she went on vacation to Tokyo. She said as she's walking around the streets, she ran into this very old man. She said this old man was excited to see her, and he runs over to her. And he says, you're from America. And she said, yeah, I am from America. And he goes, I've been to America. And she goes, oh, really? You know, like, where have you been in America? And he goes, I've been to the Grand Canyon. And she goes, oh, great, so you went on vacation to the Grand Canyon. And he goes, no. He said, in World War II, I was fighting, and I was captured. And they took me and other Japanese POWs, and we were brought to the Grand Canyon to dig. And she goes, you mean dig mines? And he goes, no, we were there looking for something. And she goes, what do you mean? What were you looking for at the Grand Canyon? And he just kind of smiles, and he says, I haven't told anyone this. I've never talked about this. But he said, me and the other men, we had to dig these tunnels, like we were searching for something. And then one day, we came upon these giant doors. They were hidden deep inside the canyon. We put some explosives next to the canyon, or next to the doors. And after we detonated the TNT, the doors opened up, and out stepped these very large giants. And the lady said, giants, like you must be mistaken. And he goes, no, very huge humans. And he said they all came running out, chasing after him and his men. Some of them they grabbed, some of them were ripped apart, some of them were taken back into the cave. And he said, when we got outside of this tunnel, we were gathered up and we were locked away and we were told never to talk about it. And he said, but there are giants there at the Grand Canyon. So what do you think? Is there something hiding? Is there something going on at the Grand Canyon?
In the year 994, in the Aquitaine region of what is now southern France, approximately 20 to 40,000 people died in a single outbreak of what contemporaries called Ignis Sacr, holy fire. The victims of holy fire experienced burning sensations in their extremities, convulsions, hallucinations, and in the worst cases, the blackening and eventual sloughing off of their fingers, toes, and limbs. Entire villages watched as neighbors essentially decayed from within, their bodies rotting away while their minds fractured. Medieval communities understood these outbreaks as spiritual affliction, as divine punishment for sin, as demonic possession or collective visitation from the devil, or the presence of malignant spirits that had settled over the affected region for this or that reason. The suffering was so extraordinary and so specifically horrifying that it seemed to transcend the ordinary categories of medieval illness. They eventually named the affliction after Saint Anthony the Great, the Desert Father whose relics were held at the Abbey of Saint-Antoine-en-Venois in France. There, a specialized hospital emerged specifically to care for victims of what would come to be known colloquially as St. Anthony's Fire. With the benefit of modern science and medicine, we can now, with reasonable certainty, identify what was actually behind this outbreak of 994. Spoiler alert, It wasn't divine retribution or demonic intervention. It had nothing to do with God or the devil or ghosts or spirits. It was fungus. So I'm currently writing, or rather rewriting, my third book. And in doing a bit of tangential research for the story, I accidentally fell down a rabbit hole. And now I'm making it your problem. So let's talk about ergot, specifically about the place it occupies in the historical explanation of supernatural experience. Ergot is a common name for Claviceps purpurea, a fungus that grows on cereal grains, occasionally on wheat or barley, but most notoriously on rye, which was the staple grain of Northern Europe for much of the medieval and early modern period. Under specific weather conditions, i.e. warm, wet summers and mild winters, ergot can produce large infestations across rye fields, resulting in grain that looks superficially normal, but is contaminated with a class of chemicals called ergot alkaloids. Those alkaloids do two specific things to the human body when consumed. The first is that they cause severe vasoconstriction. That is the narrowing of blood vessels, which can lead to reduced blood flow to the extremities, tissue death, and eventual gangrene. This is the burning aspect of St. Anthony's fire. The fire metaphor deployed as a way to describe the sensation of intense heat and pain in the limbs as the tissue dies from oxygen deprivation. The second thing these alkaloids do, and here is what piques my particular interest, is produce neurological and psychiatric effects. Hallucinations, convulsions, delirium, severe anxiety, feelings of being crawled on or bitten or otherwise touched by unseen entities, distorted perception, and profound alterations of consciousness. The ergot alkaloid family includes chemical compounds that are structurally related to LSD, which was itself first synthesized from ergot in 1938 by the Swiss chemist Albert Hofmann. And this is where ergot enters the analytical discussion of the supernatural, for the possibilities it presents as an explanation for historical incidents of hauntings and other supposedly supernatural phenomena. In consuming bread made from contaminated rye, medieval and early modern populations were inadvertently and repeatedly dosing themselves with a fungus that produced hallucinations and convulsions, in addition to gangrene. The reason we know ergot was responsible for so many outbreaks of St. Anthony's fire is that the specific pattern of symptoms, the gangrene plus the neurological effects, combined with the geographic clustering in rye-eating regions and the correlation with weather patterns favorable to fungal growth, is extremely difficult to explain by any other cause. Modern historical epidemiology has been able to trace many of the great medieval and early modern outbreaks of holy fire to specific weather years and specific grain conditions. The ergot explanation for medieval St. Anthony's fire is, at this point, essentially uncontested. But that has opened up a whole new can of worms. Because once you have a naturalistic explanation for one category of historical supernatural experience, the temptation becomes almost irresistible to reach for the same explanation for every other historical experience that shares any superficial similarity. And because of this, scholars argue that the ergot theory has been seriously overextended. The most famous case is the Salem witch trials. In 1976, a graduate student in psychology named Linda Caparel published an article in the journal Science. The article proposed that the mysterious afflictions of the accusing girls at Salem in 1692 were consistent with the effects of convulsive ergotism. Caparel supports the argument by pointing out that the summer of 1691 had been unusually warm and wet, that Salem Village's primary grain crop was rye, and that the specific pattern of symptoms among the afflicted matched the known effects of ergot poisoning. The theory was wildly compelling. It seemed to solve, in a single stroke, one of the most famous unexplained episodes in American history. And it caught on immediately in popular culture. Today, most people who know anything about the Salem trials have likely heard the ergot theory. Repeated in countless documentaries, popular articles, and history classrooms, it is the single most common naturalistic explanation for the Salem crisis that lay audiences encounter. It is also, according to the current scholarly consensus, almost certainly incorrect. Within months of Caparel's article, researchers Nicholas Spanos and Jack Gottlieb published a detailed rebuttal in the same journal. Their objections were substantive, providing a very compelling argument for how naturalistic explanations get over-applied to historical evidence. The first problem they cited was symptom mismatch. Convulsive ergotism produces a specific and consistent set of physical symptoms, including vomiting, diarrhea, spastic muscular contractions, permanent physical damage in severe cases, and in ergot outbreaks with gangrenous components, actual tissue death in the extremities. The historical record of Salem does not describe these symptoms among the afflicted girls. They had convulsions and hallucinations, yes, but they did not have the accompanying gastrointestinal, dermatological, and gangrenous symptoms that would be expected in a genuine ergot outbreak. The second problem was distribution. Ergot poisoning affects populations who eat contaminated grain. If a village's rye supply was contaminated, you would expect ergotism symptoms to appear on a house-by-house basis, correlated with which households ate the contaminated bread, right? Salem's afflicted were not distributed this way. The afflictions were clustered among specific individuals who fell into a very specific demographic. That is, mostly young girls, most of whom were socially connected to one another. Such patterns did not correlate with grain supply patterns. The third objection they raised is that communities historically affected by convulsive ergotism share a specific vulnerability: severe vitamin A deficiency. Found primarily in dairy products and fish, vitamin A plays a protective role against the worst effects of ergot poisoning. Communities with adequate vitamin A intake do not typically experience convulsive ergotism outbreaks, even when their grain supply is contaminated. Now, consider Salem. It was a New England agricultural community with abundant access to dairy and fish. Its population actually had significantly higher vitamin A intake than the medieval European populations that experienced the great historical outbreaks of St. Anthony's Fire. Even if the rye had been contaminated, the population would likely have been protected from the worst neurological effects. As I said, the rebuttal of Spanos and Gottlieb was compelling, and over the past few decades, the Salem ergot theory has been all but entirely dismantled by scholars in the field. And yet, you've probably still heard it. In fact, despite its invalidation, the theory continues to circulate as one of the most commonly cited explanations for one of history's most famous supernatural episodes. In modern popular history, the ergot explanation has become something like an intellectual escape hatch. Every time we encounter a historical episode involving mass supernatural experience, our first modern instinct is to reach for the tidiest possible naturalistic explanation. And ergot is, on the surface, an extremely tidy explanation. But the reason it's tidy is because it allows us to stop thinking. Blame the fungus and the case is closed. The medieval people who thought they saw devils, the Salem accusers who claimed to be tormented by spectral figures, the dancing manias of the 15th century, the possession outbreaks in French convents in the 17th century, the mass visions in medieval religious communities, all reduced down to biology and chemistry. This is the same intellectual overcorrection that I've discussed in previous videos about anomalistic psychology. It's supremely important to investigate the possible naturalistic explanations behind supposed supernatural phenomena, but it's equally important to recognize when the naturalistic explanations are inadequate. Bottom line is that ergotism cannot adequately explain the Salem witch craze. That explanation minimizes the fascinating complexity of the historical moment. The specific combination of social tension and gender politics, colonial anxieties, adolescent psychology, religious framework, and the specific community dynamics that produce the crisis, all of which paint a picture that is much more complicated and much more disturbing than a fungal explanation allows for. It requires us to recognize that human beings are capable of exhibiting strange, sometimes ugly, sometimes seemingly inexplicable behavior without any chemical inducement. The most responsible and honest answer, as with most questions related to historical anomalistic psychology, is that ergot is merely one explanation in a cluttered toolbox of many explanations. That, at least, is the position I try to maintain in my historical studies, but also in my horror stories. Anyone who's read Disproving Kilvain will know that I love ambiguous hauntings, when naturalistic and supernatural explanations are held in productive tension rather than resolved in one direction either way. I love lingering question marks and the disquieting uncertainty of whether something is actually physically real or psychologically rooted. Although DK heavily engages with the past, it is very much set in the present. My third book, the one I'm working on right now, is actually a prequel to DK, set 500 years before. In it, I take all the ambiguous haunting and psychological uncertainty tropes I love and drop them into the 16th century, in a cloistered monastic community that is experiencing a sustained outbreak of what its inhabitants understand as supernatural affliction. But are the hauntings indeed supernatural or something else? That's the central question that drives the story. Ergot is just one of many possibilities in play, along with human deception, the specific psychological effects of monastic isolation and ascetic living, the community's own theological and experiential frameworks. And of course, there's always the possibility that there's something genuinely supernatural going on, something the naturalistic explanations cannot fully account for. Think Umberto Eco's Name of the Rose, but more ghosty and horror-oriented. More on that book later. First, I have to finish it and get my second book, Echoes in Glass, published. I promise I will not make a habit of teasing books that are 2 years out. My research on ergot just got me excited, and I had to talk about it with you guys.
I brought something back from a dream. This story is allegedly true. It came from someone named Kitty. That is a pseudonym, but she said she will be seeing the comments. And it is a very strange story. I've never covered anything like this or gotten anything like this for Spooky Scary Storytime before. But she swears this really happened, and she said while it's not creepy, it is still the strangest experience she's ever had, and she cannot explain it to this day. This took place when she was in year 7 or 8, and it's considered intermediate in New Zealand. She's not sure what the American equivalent would be, but she was about 13 years old. Best friend and her were on holiday with her best friend's grandparents, and they often did this, and anytime they did, they slept in a caravan. But when they slept in the caravan, they brought their own bedding, their own sleeping bags, their own blankets and pillows. That's important because it proves that there was no way that what she brought back from her dream was stuck in her blanket somehow. She had a normal day on holiday with her best friend and her best friend's grandparents, and at the end of the day, she went to sleep in the caravan. And while she was sleeping, she had a dream, a very vivid dream, in which she met a girl named Roxy Pastry. Roxy had gray eyes and brown hair, and in a way, she reminded Kitty of her own best friend, but Roxy also had a best friend in the dream who was a blonde girl, but Kitty can't remember her name. In the dream, Kitty remembers that she became friends with both Roxy and Roxy's blonde friend. And the girls had matching bracelets. Roxy's was silver with a purple stone, and her blonde friend's was gold with a pink stone. She remembers the bracelets vividly, even to this day, like 14 years later. She says that both of them were engraved with the other's names and with the letters BFFL. While the only vivid details that she remembers about the dream were Roxy's name, description, and her bracelet, she can't remember the ending of the dream. When she woke up, she was holding Roxy's bracelet. It was silver with Roxy's name engraved, and the clasp was broken. Couldn't explain it. She thought she was still dreaming, but she pinched herself and she wasn't. And so she woke up her best friend and asked her about it, and her friend was like, I have no idea. She asked her best friend's family. She asked anyone in the area if they had lost this bracelet, and nobody knew where it came from. Held on to it. She still has it, and she says to this day, she has no explanation for it. She has no idea who Roxy was, but Roxy, if you're out there, I guess I have your bracelet. If you're new here, Spooky Scary Storytime is a series of allegedly true listener-submitted stories about the creepiest or most unsettling things that people have ever experienced. If you have a story of your own, please send it in. We would love to hear it.
This is so strange, right? So 3 lighthouse keepers disappeared from a tiny Scottish island, and no one ever found them. In December 1900, James, Donald and Thomas were all working at the lighthouse together, but passing boats started to notice that the light on the lighthouse was switched off, so they eventually sent someone out, which ended up taking 11 days by the time someone could get out there to check on them. So when the person got there to check on them, there was nobody there, but everything was very strangely in order. The lighthouse was locked, the beds were empty, the kitchen was cleaned. Now, there's a famous version of the story that says there was an overturned chair and an untouched meal, as if the men had been interrupted. However, those details are not actually in the investigation. What the investigators actually found was railings that had been ripped away and equipment that has been displaced. So the theory that the investigators come up with was that 2 of the men must have went outside to sort out equipment, and then a massive wave hit. And so the other man must have run out to help, and that somehow all 3 bodies were washed into sea, but no bodies have ever been found. And I also find it really weird that the lighthouse was locked up, because if you're in an emergency, are you running down and then thinking to lock the lighthouse? I don't know. So some people do think that this was a really tragic accident, whereas others think something strange, something ghosty. People have even talked about sea monsters and things of that sort. But really, 3 men went to work at this lighthouse and just never came home.
A series of spooky stories, Women's Intuition. In late 2020, my mom happened to be scrolling LinkedIn and came across an article about this man who ended up being my cousin on my dad's side. At that point, I hadn't spoken to my dad since I was a kid, but she showed me the post and told me that man looks like he could be related to my dad's family. When I was Facebook stalking my dad, I saw that my cousin's mom was one of the only aunts my dad listed on his Facebook. I contacted his cousin on LinkedIn, took a genealogy test, and we confirmed that we were family and kept closely in touch. About 5 months after I took that test, he was the one who called me saying that my dad had died, and my dad's friends were trying to get in contact with his kids and found him. Had I never met him and had my mom not had a feeling about him, I never would have known that my dad had died. When I was 15, I was laying on my couch watching TV with my cat on my stomach. Out of nowhere, she started to twitch like a seizure and then went limp. I freaked out and put my hand on her to see if she was still breathing. She opened her eyes, looked at me, and jumped down like I was bothering her. Once her feet hit the floor, the phone rang. It was my best friend calling me to let her know that her mother had a heart attack and was going to the hospital. That's crazy. Just happened last month. I had a bad feeling and I couldn't shake it, but I went on the family camping trip anyway. Got a call from my grandpa's life alert, but he sent them away, said that he felt fine, but the feeling stuck that something was wrong. I woke up at 4 a.m. with the feeling of something sitting on my chest and I couldn't breathe. An hour and a half later, I found out that Grandpa had a heart attack. He seemed to be doing well, and my husband and I made it to see where he was sitting up and being a gossip, flirting with the nurses. But when we went to leave, my husband and I both said, "I loved you," and he stopped us at the door and said he loved us both. And I knew. An hour later, he passed away, and I felt it before the calls came in. Found out that I was pregnant 3 days after my mother-in-law died, after years of trying in infertility issues. Immediately felt it was twins. A few weeks later, the doctor confirmed. I'm convinced that my mother-in-law had something to do with this. I would say so too. After my first child, I kept having dreams of me with 4 blonde-headed kids, 2 boys and 2 girls. I only knew my girls' names, the one I had and then the baby girl. 5 years later, I had a second baby girl, named her what was in the dream, and I thought that it was crazy because I had never heard Presley. Now nothing would ever suit her better. I had a sinking feeling in my gut that I needed to check on my little cousin, who was an hour away by drive. I had to pay a family member to take me to my little cousin's house. I used my key, and I found her in the middle of a seizure, and she would have aspirated if I hadn't got there when I did. One time, I went out with a friend for drinks, and midway I had a feeling I needed to go home and check on my man. So I did, even though my friend was upset because we had just started to get food and drinks. When I got home, I ran to our room. He was passed out in a pool of his vomit and struggling to breathe. I'm sure he would have died that night if I wouldn't have came home when I did. On the topic of twin tuition, I was merging onto the highway and got pulled over for swerving, and the officer asked if I was okay, and I started crying and said, "No, I'm in labor." Except I wasn't pregnant, but my twin sister was 2,000 miles away. So as he looked at me funny, I called her on speaker and asked what she was doing. She said, "At the hospital, in labor." The officer was with me for a few minutes until the contractions went away, and a few minutes later, I had a nephew. Can you imagine not being pregnant and having to go through the contractions just because you're feeling sympathy pain because you're a twin? Ugh, not fun.
I always sleep with the bedroom door closed at night. I don't know what it is, I don't know why, but I always feel more comfortable when the door is closed at night. Now, going back to ancient times, they believed doors not only protected them from humans entering their home, but something negative or evil from coming in. Now, maybe there's something to this. There was a case out in Connecticut. There was this older woman named Ashley. Ashley moves in with a roommate, and it was a small little apartment. She had lived there for about 6 weeks, and she said she was the kind of person that always slept with the door closed at night. But this particular apartment, her bedroom would get really, really warm, and the only way to cool it down was to leave the bedroom door open. So she started sleeping with the doorway open. She said one night she was in bed, and out of the corner of her eye, as she turned in her bed, she looked over at the doorway and she seen someone walk past. And she kind of rubbed her eyes, and once again, she's seen someone walk past the other way. So the next day, she's talking to her roommate and said, "Were you walking around last night? I kept seeing you walk by the doorway." And he goes, "No, I was asleep in bed the whole night. I didn't get up or anything." So next couple of weeks, this keeps happening. She keeps seeing someone walk by her doorway at night. And then one night it happens, and her roommate is not there. And she actually calls up her roommate. He comes home. He searches the apartment. They don't find anything. So she said then about a couple weeks after that, once again, she was asleep in her bedroom. And she said she woke up and she just felt very, very cold that night. And when she looked over at her door, which was wide open, she said she noticed the doorway was partially closed. It had moved, which was odd because she knew she left the door all the way swung open. And she said that's when she started to hear this scratching sound. And then the sound of footsteps. Boom, 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 walking down the hallway. She said it got right to her doorway, and she started to hear kind of this weird moaning, groaning, kind of raspy sound. And she said she called out to her roommate, "Hey, is that you? What are you doing?" She didn't hear a response. So she gets up, she goes over to the doorway, and she looks out. There's no one there. This happens 2 or 3 more times where she hears these footsteps and she can hear this moaning and groaning sound. So finally she said, "You know what, this must just all be in my head. I'm freaking myself out. I'm going to go back to sleep." So she lays down and she falls asleep. But about an hour later, she wakes up, and when she turns over in the bed and she looks at the doorway, she said there was a woman in this big, tall, brimmed black hat. She didn't have a face, and she was wearing some sort of weird black cloth around her. And she said she tried to scream, but she couldn't move, and it felt like something was holding her down. And whatever it was, she could not move at all. She said that's when all of a sudden the hallway light turned on, and her roommate come down the hallway to use the bathroom. And whatever this was, it was gone. She could move again. She ran out of the bedroom, runs to her roommate, tells him what happened. And the roommate just kind of gives her this strange look. And he says, about 2 years ago, I had the same exact experience. But it's weird. When I started having this thing, I started seeing the same thing as you. I would close my door at night and it stopped happening. And so she said that for the period of time that she lived at this apartment, she would sleep with the door closed. So what do you think? Does sleeping at night with the door closed keep us safe?
Want to start streaming today? Tap the Go Live link below to test it now.
You're driving home in the middle of nowhere when a woman suddenly runs in the middle of the road. You slam on your brakes and she's barefoot and covered in blood and screaming for you to unlock the passenger door. And before you do, she turns around and looks towards the field. And that's when you see several flashlight beams quickly moving towards you. And she says, "We have to go right now." And then you look behind you and see headlights. A pickup truck pulls sideways across the road, blocking the way you came, and then you see another one ahead of you doing the same. You're now trapped between them, and the only way out is a narrow dirt path on the side of the road cutting through the field. And the woman now says, "Don't let them see me." And now you see men getting out of the trucks. The flashlights in the field are getting closer, and now you have 3 choices. A, unlock the door, let the woman in, and then take the dirt road. B, leave her outside and take the dirt road alone. Or C, keep your doors locked and try to get around either of the trucks before they can reach you. Then the woman looks through your windshield and goes completely still and whispers, "That's not them." You look towards the field and all of the flashlights have stopped now. And you can see something much taller than a person standing in the field. You have 10 seconds, choose A, B, or C.
Have you ever heard of the Tyrant of Clipperton Island? Clipperton Island is a tiny island that is about 1,000 kilometers southwest from the Mexican coast. This island is currently uninhabited, but at one point this was heavily fought over for its strategic location and also the guano that is on the island that is valued for its fertilizer properties. But the people who were fighting over it was the United States, Mexico, and Great Britain. In the early 1900s, Mexico sent a small colony of about 13 soldiers and his families to go guard this island. This included Governor Ramon Arnaud. Mexico would frequently send ships to the small colony to provide them with food and water and all the essentials that they needed because there is nothing on this island. But eventually the Mexican Revolutionary War started and the ships just stopped showing up. This was devastating for the colony because they just weren't getting the food that they needed, and the adults, especially the men, started dying of scurvy because they just couldn't get enough vitamin C. Eventually, a lot or most of the men would pass away, leaving only 4 men and Governor Ramon Arnaud. One day, he thought that he saw a ship in the horizon, and so he and the 4 men got onto a dinghy to go meet the ship. Unfortunately, there was no ship there, and a fight broke out amongst the men, and they all fell overboard and drowned. Just hours after this happened, a hurricane would hit the island, and Arnaud's wife went into labor. The hurricane basically destroyed most of what they had on the island, and this left one man who was the lightkeeper in charge of everything. His name was Victoriano Alvarez, but he wasn't a very kind man. Victoriano took possession of all of the weapons and threw them into a lagoon, leaving only one for himself. He began terrorizing the women and children who were left on the island with him, and he would often essay them and beat them. And if they refused him, it would be even worse for them. His reign of terror went on for 2 years until he set his sight on Governor Arnaud's widow. One woman, her name was Tirza. I am pronouncing that wrong. Please correct me down in the comments. But her and her daughter had been a victim of him. But when they heard that he was going after Governor Arnaud's widow, they had had enough. So she warned the widow of what was coming. Tirza and Victoriano. Governor Arnaud's widow her name was Alicia. Sorry, I should have said that in the beginning. But Alicia and Tirza decided that they had had enough. So they waited for him in hiding and then hit him in the head with a hammer and beat him to death. Very shortly after this, the women noticed that there was a ship in the horizon. This time it was a real ship, and it was USS Yorktown, an American gunship that was looking for German boats. It would take the ship 2 times to get to the shore, but they finally were able to make it to shore, and they were able to rescue the group of women and children who were still alive. There were 3 women and 8 children, and the people that rescued them decided not to tell anyone. They brought them back to Mexico, thankfully, and they were able to get the help they needed. And the people on the ship, along with the 3 women, decided not to tell anyone what had happened to Victoriano, the man who was terrorizing them, for fear that they would have public consequences and also legal consequences. It would take 17 years for this story to come out. No colony has ever lived on Clipperton Island again, and honestly, I think Victoriano got what he deserved. But what are your thoughts on this? Let me know down in the comments, and follow for more true crime.
Okay, so that was Yang. I'll put her last name right here. She was a 24-year-old influencer that was known for investigating the paranormal, and a lot of times she would challenge superstitions. In that video, she is seen smashing a religious statue. This is who the statue is of. I don't want to butcher the name, but in the video, she's smashing the statue to prove that absolutely nothing will happen to her. Like, there will be no sort of supernatural consequences for her essentially disrespecting this very sacred statue. Well, less than a year later, she ends up getting into a car accident and did not make it. Apparently on August 10th of this year, she got into a car crash, and after she passed away, this video came back up, and a lot of people are trying to like connect the two and pretty much say that that was her consequence for like what she did. Because honestly, like, the timing of everything is extremely terrifying, and when it comes to those things, you always have to be extremely respectful. Like, I cover a lot of different traditions and religions, and just because I don't follow it doesn't mean that I'm going to take away from the person that does follow it. And I'm always going to approach everything with extreme caution and extreme respect, because everybody has their own beliefs. Was her connected to her smashing the statue? That's up for debate. Some people agree that 100% yes. Other people are saying that no. It could have just been a very tragic accident, but honestly, when it comes to the paranormal world, you just never know. And just because nothing happened to you in that moment does not mean that something isn't waiting for its chance to come at you. Like, everything you do in this lifetime, you pay for in this lifetime, and that includes disrespecting the paranormal. But like always, what do you guys think?
Want to hear something scary? This is a part 5 of the series, My Follower Stories. If you want yours, submit in the comments or email me. As always, the commenters' names will be on the screen. My story begins when I was younger. I'd gotten a bike as a gift for my birthday, and it was one of my prized possessions. I used to ride it constantly. Whether it was during the day or night, I was using it. One day, I decided to ride my bike in the middle of the night, which wasn't unusual. Keep in mind, I have an electric bike, and so it can get up to speeds of 18 miles per hour. This night, I was riding through my town and came up to a forest. I was really familiar with the forest because of how long we lived in the area, so I began my ride through the woods, not thinking much of it. But about 5 minutes into the ride, I began to hear something odd. I couldn't pinpoint what the sound was because it was like nothing I'd ever heard before. At first, I thought maybe it was my bike and something was wrong with it. So I slowed my bike down to a stop and got off to check it. I looked at the pedals, the brakes, and the wires. I had experienced doing this because my dad didn't want his daughter to end up stuck in the middle of the road on a broken bike and not know how to fix it. Anyways, I could find nothing wrong with my bike, and I moved to get back on. But as I did this, I heard a piercing screech. It sounded inhuman, and came far too close behind me. I immediately jumped and whipped my head around to look behind me, and I saw what appeared to be a half-deer, half-demon-looking thing lunging at me full speed. The fear I felt in that moment isn't even something I can describe, but I've never moved quicker in my life. I jumped on my bike and went from 0 to 18 in about half a second, shooting full throttle now through the woods. I'm surprised I didn't fall or hit a tree with how recklessly I was driving. I didn't look back, but I could hear it panting and snarling behind me as it ran, and in that moment, I genuinely thought I was going to die. Even when I broke through the brush and began to ride down the street, it still wouldn't stop chasing me. My mind was running 1,000,000 miles a minute, trying to figure out where to go and what to do. I could go home, but thought against it because my house had a porch, and so I would have to stop and carry my bike up the stairs, which would be far too slow. So instead, I went to my grandma's house. Unlike my house, she didn't have a porch entrance. She had a gate. The entire ride there, I could hear the thing on my heels, even as I gunned it. I shot through the gate, and she has a ramp and stairs to the entrance that she made for my great-grandma. Great-grandma's doing wheelies up that ramp. So I went up the ramp, still riding my bike, and shot into the house. I practically launched myself off the bike to go lock the doors around the house before whatever that thing was could get inside. I had told my dad that I was going out on my bike that night, so he knew I was out and about. So I just texted him asking if I could stay at my grandma's. He said yes. Fast forward to the next morning, I had no choice but to go home, albeit I was reluctant for obvious reasons. I walked out of my grandma's house with my bike and pushed open the gate, peeking out, and saw nothing. I hesitantly stepped onto the sidewalk and let the gate swing closed behind me and turned to lock it, when I froze. On the outside of the gate were 3 large claw marks and a bunch of small scratch marks all over the wood. I'm so thankful I made it out that night. I really thought I was going to die. You know what this story reminds me of when I first read this? You know that scene in Stranger Things where Will is riding his bike alone in the woods and he gets chased down by the Demogorgon? You might be Will Byers. I don't know. This story takes place about 2 months ago. My friends and I were camping right outside a small town in the mountains. This campsite had a railroad that went throughout the town, which is relevant to the story. It was a fun stay, and I enjoyed being with my friends for the weekend, and ran into virtually no trouble besides a few scraped knees and bee stings, which is why during the last night of our stay we expected nothing untoward to happen. We were walking along the railroad like we had several nights before, and I just remember the first 15-ish minutes of our walk. For some reason, when I try to think beyond that, I only draw blanks. During these initial 15 minutes, we were walking the opposite direction of the town for no real reason, other than the fact that we were curious. Eventually my friends got bored and wanted to turn around, but I said we should just go a little further because I think there might be something cool ahead. However, despite my nagging, they continued to refuse, and I eventually agreed to go back towards the town. This is where my memory gets fuzzy. We turned around to go towards the camp, but from there, until we stepped foot back at the site, my memory is blank. But this is what my friends said happened. They said about 5 minutes after we turned around, I got oddly quiet, which is very uncharacteristic for me. I apparently started following a few steps behind them, and began walking with my head bowed. They said I continued to walk in this manner the whole time back to camp, and that there was a point where they all needed to go to the bathroom in the middle of the walk, but I outright refused to leave the point. And there was a point where they all needed to go to the bathroom in the middle of the walk, but I outright refused to leave the railroad. They reiterated our biggest rule back to me that we all agreed no matter what, we have to stay together. I just told them that the rule was stupid and continued to put my foot down, refusing to go with them. However, they said after a while of arguing and convincing, they eventually were able to get me to agree to go with them. However, when I stepped off the tracks, I apparently started pacing back and forth and began shaking and mumbling something that they couldn't make out. They said after we started walking back towards the camp again, that's when they realized that they hadn't seen my face since we turned around 10 minutes ago. They asked me to look up at them, and when I did, they realized my eyes were completely black, and knew in that moment something was really wrong. Yeah, I think if your friend's eyes are completely black, something's probably wrong. They panicked and began walking faster out of fear, and apparently one of my friends tried to get my attention by saying my name, but I didn't respond. I then sat down in the middle of the tracks and began rocking back and forth, saying something about a tall man in a suit. I stayed sitting there for a few minutes before abruptly getting back up and borderline running back to the campsite. However, the second I stepped foot back at the site, I became completely normal again. We still have no idea what happened or why I behaved the way I did, but we're all too scared to go back there again. My room is really small, and I mean excessively small. I do have a closet in the corner of my room, however, that is also far too small for it to be of any real use to me. So instead, I used 2 stacked dressers, which is relevant to the story. On this night, I remember waking up and turning over and seeing the time on the clock, exactly midnight. I glanced over into the dark room and saw that one of my dressers was now on the ground and my closet was wide open. This was odd because, as I had previously stated, I didn't really use my closet, and the dresser, albeit not huge, it is big enough that if it were to fall, the sound should have woken me up, but it didn't. I was beginning to get creeped out and wanted to get a better look at what was going on, so I reached over and flicked on my lamplight. The second I did this, my closet door slammed shut. After that, my memory goes blank. I woke up in the morning to everything being back to normal. The dressers were in the right spot and the closet door was closed like it was never even opened in the first place. I thought maybe I just had a bad dream, but the next night was even worse. I woke up at exactly midnight once again, and felt an immediate dread when I saw the time on the clock. I hesitantly looked over to my closet, and this time, both of my dressers were on the ground and my closet was wide open again. This obviously scared me, and I didn't want to be alone in my room anymore. I jumped off my bed and made a run for my door, but when I turned the handle, I realized I couldn't open it. I yanked on it and went to go check if it was locked, only to remember that this door doesn't have a lock. Someone or something was physically holding it shut. I was yanking on it for what felt like forever, my panic rising, and as it reached its peak, I felt a sharp scratch on my back. I screamed and whipped around, only to find nothing there. I don't know how I fell asleep, or how I ended up back in my bed, but the next morning I woke up. The memories of the night before flooded back to me, and I threw off the covers trying the door again, this time finding it unlocked. I ran down the hallway to the bathroom, and turned to the mirror and pulled up the back of my shirt, only to find 5 handprints and multiple red scratches down my back. I still can't explain what happened or why, but thankfully it hasn't happened again. I feel like I'm going crazy. Please tell me I'm not going crazy. I don't think you're going crazy. You know what this sounds like to me? This reminds me of that one scene from The Conjuring where that one demon is like on the dresser.
Bro, what's going on around? All right, tonight's true story comes from Sad 330, and it was titled Ghost Child, Perhaps. So I got home a little late last night, around 10 p.m., and decided to take out the new puppy. I have about 2 acres with some woods at the very back abutting against my property. But a typical country setting. On our way out, my new puppy alerted, or hit, on something, and stopped in her tracks, and stared at the back corner of our property. Thinking nothing of it, I redirected her towards me, and we continued on our usual route of my land for our walk. We do a few laps around the perimeter until she goes potty. Anyways, on our second lap, she was gearing up to do her business and standing next to me when, clear as day, I hear a child's voice say, "Mommy? Mommy?" I mean, unmistakably crystal clear. My pup stopped dead in her tracks, stopped mid-potty, spins around, and looks at the exact same place as the first time of our property. I don't have kids, but always wanted some, and there was no wind blowing and no nearby neighbors. This was no animal noise either. Clearly, a young male's voice had just been calling for his mommy. Pup and I halted inside as soon as my hair stood up. The walk was over. I ran in and fetched my husband, who came out with all the appropriate tools, if you catch my drift. My buddy at the Northwest Wind would say accoutrements. Anyway, we couldn't find a single soul. Searched high and low, because naturally I was concerned it was a runaway child or something, and there was nothing. Just me now looking like a fool in front of my husband. Anyway, I've tried looking this up online, what it might mean, and I am so stumped. It just keeps pointing me back to real child situations. I've been skeptical of ghosts my entire life, but has anyone else had this happen to them? Is it possible maybe my pup was something a child who hadn't crossed over yet was interested in? Do I maybe look like his mom? I don't want to be creeped out by this because it wasn't a harmful or malicious type mommy. But sheesh, I just can't get it off of my mind. Any helpful tips or words of wisdom, please, so I don't feel like a crazy lady? Wow, Sad, that's a pretty fascinating story. And yeah, I'm kind of inclined to agree that maybe you did hear actually a child who hadn't crossed over yet, or at least something that was trying to present itself as a child. That's always a factor too. But anyway, that's been Jay's Haunted Appalachia for tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed the story. Thank you, Sad 330, for sending it in. Y'all keep sending me those stories and suggestions, and keep Appalachia haunted.